Okay.
Yes.
I guess tonight I'm going to speak to you as both an artist and as a curator. Many hats that I'm wearing, and sometimes I get a little bit confused. Anyway, and this is because my artistic practice and my theory, as well as my curatorial practice, are very much entangled. And my work usually explores how scientific and technological mechanisms translate, encode, and transform the natural and human world, and how these mechanisms actually perform when they are transported elsewhere. So when you're taking the lab and you're bringing it into the market square, or when you are translating them into other media. So when you're taking digital media and you're turning them back into analog media. So usually my artifacts are itinerant and mobile. I make these contraptions, and I made several of them. But today I am going to talk about one specifically, which is the TIP Lab, or the Transition in Progress project, which will actually let you... How many people have been in Toronto ever? Ah, some of you. So I'll make you love Toronto. I know that most people think of Canada as a very boring country, and as Toronto as like really utilitarian city, but there's a lot of richness to it. And this comes, and this actually inspired the title of today's presentation, How to Cope with Ecological Complexity, because of course part of the stereotypes and part of the stories about the city and about places, because then I'm also going to talk about another project, but the stories about places are usually told through very standardized narratives, and the systems of mapping that we have at our disposal are sometimes not able to communicate these complexities. So how do you do? So as I said, I am going to introduce you to two projects. One is Transition in Progress, which is both itinerant and mobile installation and an exhibition. And the Cabinet project, which is only in progress. It will go live, so to say, in March 2017. And will utilize spaces within the University of Toronto, and is going to be an itinerant exhibition. So, so when I think of technologies, I usually think of some kind of top-down processes, but not. I don't necessarily imply by this as an oppressive relation that we have with technologies. I'm thinking more about the delegation, as in Bruno Latour's definition. We are delegating tasks to technologies. So I think that technologies are very important in my work, despite the fact that most of my work is on the ground. So I somehow defined my methodologies as being both technological and as in vivo. In vivo is the definition that I came up with. But technological, meaning that I usually have archives extensive archives that I built into these websites, and I use the maps that we have at our disposal, like Google Maps and augmented reality attached to the Google Map. But as I was telling you before, when you're thinking about maps, maps usually square a circle. maps usually create narratives that are very much standardized, that are very much the voice of those who are already ruling. What about the voices of those people who do not have a voice? And by this I do not just imply people like disenfranchised people, the homeless, people of color, the poor, the children, the elderly. There's that, but there's also the animals, the plants, the infrastructure that has been forgotten within the city. What are we doing with this? So for me, the process of the methodology, the in vivo methodology comes when we are trying to go beyond maps. This is a map, and as you see, these are all historical, kind of like colonial type of buildings. So, I want to Sarah Watmore identifies the more than human as the excess of the human. And as I was saying before, the human as just one part of this whole ecological system that is the city, or a whole ecological system that is the university, for instance. A beautiful ecological system that we have here, by the way. And and this system is constantly made and remade through networks and systems, and is located at the feverish borders of animal and machines, social and material, flash information, culture, and nature. Therefore, when I was showing you maps before, and mapping in general, these maps are not sufficient to make the complexity and the intricacy of complex places, such as the university or the city. I named the name ecology. And ecology as a system comprised of interactions among organisms, the natural forces, and human-made artifacts, and human-caused phenomena that participate in making and transforming this system. This system, this ecological system, I actually oppose to an economy. The economy is a system of exclusion, a system that regiments and regulates things. It's a system of compartmentalization managed through rules and agreement. The two are complementary, but what I'm doing with my project is I'm trying to prioritize the ecology. So, and I'm also drawn to, so we are thinking about going back to thinking in terms of ecological systems as something new. In reality, it's always been there. Indigenous research has always done that. For example, the Zapatistas have this idea about walking and listening, talking and doing. And basically each individual, by talking and walking and listening with other individuals, is able to engage freely in a variety of ways and to experience such activity differently. So, going back to the project, the transition in progress, so the TIP lab, I will call it TIP lab for brevity, was a mobile lab, an exhibition, and an online archive. Here you see, well, it's not very well made in the sense that this is Queen Street, which is one of the major arteries in Toronto. Actually, the two maps should be one after the other, but there was no space, so I put them one on top of the other. And it addresses the multi-layered processes of placemaking in the urban space by approaching the city as a dynamic ecosystem whose complexity is rarely reflected in its official descriptions and in its maps. So I chose, actually I should say we chose, because in this project I collaborated with several other people, and the major collaborators is 3 of us actually. So we researched and decided to focus on 4 different neighborhoods, which are 4 intersections between Queen Street and other major intersections. So these 4 neighborhoods have been the subject of many stories, mainly stories of gentrification, because Toronto has been going through a lot of changes recently. And however, the transformations have been unevenly acknowledged, if not utterly neglected, in the city's public consciousness and in the press. This includes different migration flows, for instance, in and out of the neighborhoods, different plans for revitalization, gentrification, and commercialization, affecting in different ways its residents and in a variety of ways. And it also affected, despite the fact that gentrification is just like a bunch of buildings that are coming up, right? And a lot of hipsters that are coming in. Well, you know that. Being in San Francisco. It affects different neighborhoods differently, according to the communities that are living there, according to the human and non-human population that resides there. So the question is, how do we acknowledge the different ways in which people experience the city's spaces and neighborhoods? And to initiate the conversation, the TIP lab was going around, was making stops in these different neighborhoods. And it would use sort of analog augmented reality. So this is basically an acrylic sheet, acrylic sheet print with a print of archival material from the Toronto archives. So we had 3 or 4 per intersection, and we asked the people to talk about them. And this was a great conversation piece. After that, people started bringing in objects. Like this is a transfer. We don't have that fancy card like the Clipper or any other cards that the civilized cities have. We still have the tokens, which are these like really funny things, and we have transfers in order to transfer from a streetcar to the other. And part of nature. We had little stones, we had little feathers, we have all sorts of signs of different items within these neighborhoods. So all of these items were curated into the exhibition. So at the end, what we got into the exhibition was these boxes that contain these objects that were donated by the communities. But of course, because we had several communities collaborating with each other, then the exhibition really brought to life the diversity of the neighbors and the neighborhoods. But the exhibition is one thing. The exhibition is in like this showing what we've done during our trip in the neighborhoods. But it is by using that bottom-up strategy, that in vivo strategy, rather than relying on a top-down perspective or a traditional maps, that the TIP lab was able to focus on the material processes of mediation between the human and the non-human, the animal and the human, and all the components that are entangled within the different neighborhoods. We were also able to see how the different neighborhoods are interacting with each other and how changes, despite being are often very similar across the city, affect different neighborhoods differently. So these are some of the people that we met, but then we also discovered that animals, wild animals, have a really great influence within the neighborhoods. So we have the famous star albino squirrel, who is ephemeral presence has become very important sightseeing in the parks in Toronto, especially Trinity Bellwood Park, which was one of the neighborhoods that we visited, and actually they made a coffee shop after him. The raccoons, the city forgot to move a raccoon that had died during the night, and so they made a little I don't know, something for him. And then there's still a little sign that is staying there. So all of these stories, they are not coming out when we are talking about the general narratives that are coming out about the city. It's only when you go into the neighborhoods that people start talking and start telling you things. So I am just briefly talking about the last project, the latest project, which is the cabinet project, which is more related to science, actually. So in this case, I'm still looking at, in this case, the university rather than the city as another ecosystem. An ecosystem that has a lot of liveliness, but this liveliness doesn't come out as behind closed doors, or supposedly behind closed doors. So my goal here is to continue the same exploration from below as a way to peel off official and often austere facade of institutional spaces in order to reveal their liveliness. So I intend to populate these now empty cabinets, this is stupid, inside the university, at various locations at the University of Toronto, with artworks that engage with the objects, the instruments, and the people located or working in their proximity. In fact, despite being in full sight, and being often located at the entrance of science departments in proximity of laboratories or in busy areas of transition, cabinets contain outdated posters like this one, or dusty scientific objects that have been forgotten there for years. We're talking about 70s, then I have a few anecdotes that if you want I can tell you later. The ceaseless flow of bodies working past these spaces, some running meetings, some checking their schedules, some immersed in their thoughts, rarely pay attention to them. The neglect of these cabinets seem to confirm well-established ideas about science institutions and their laboratories as recluse and sterile spaces where secrecy reigns. And communication with the outside world is either underrepresented or underappreciated or even prohibited. This is maybe partially true. Some of the scientific departments that I am dealing with are actually not finding any a benefit in putting anything whatsoever in these cabinets. Actually, they are doing a whole round of renovation and they are eliminating them, putting more administration offices, or they don't see how it would be useful to put something into these cabinets because people do not pay attention to them. So what I'm saying is, because at a closer look, the laboratories that are behind, that are located in proximity of these cabinets are very, very lively, and they have produced a lot of artifacts, sometimes to just make one experiment, sometimes so they're custom made, sometimes they have these objects laying around. Then these are some of the objects. They are part of the collection UTSIC, the collection, the University of Toronto Scientific Instrument collection. So I'm planning to work with these guys who are collecting these objects. They do not know what most of these objects are, so I am putting an open call to artists, to ask artists to tell us what these are, and eventually to collaborate with the scientists who are working in these labs to help them out. So basically, to conclude, to go back to the question, how to cope with ecological complexity. You've seen that, like what I was trying to say was, well, all these words, whether it is the university or it is the neighborhood or it is the city, they are very complex ecologies. It's very difficult to see how complex these ecologies are when you are trying to map them using just a traditional map. And no matter how complicated the technology is, there's stuff that is not measurable. And when it's not measurable, what do you do? And I think that the only way to do it is to combine technologies with a more in vivo approach, that is going in the ground, getting closer and interact with the things that are on the ground, and getting people more aware of what is going on. Thank you.